I'm Ashton. I look after inventory partnerships at the trade desk for Australia and New Zealand. And today we're going to go through a bit of a run through on identity. It wouldn't be a panel or a industry event without identity being mentioned. I'm going to touch briefly on the rollback of the cookie and its impact. There will be a couple of jabs at our friends at Google, but that's not a trade desk presentation without those as well. And then we'll also look at the trade desk's approach to identity in the form of Unified ID 2.0. We've also got Diana in the room somewhere who, as a part of our panel, we're going to be doing some live scribing. So she's a graphic designer. It's just a way to try to visualize some of the concepts that we speak through. Some of it can be pretty complicated. I don't know how she's going to try to distill it into one visual, but it should be happening on this screen or somewhere whilst we're having those conversations. So we hope to share with you guys after the chat as well, which would be great. So there's my agenda. So touching on cookies and why we're still talking about them, it is a hot topic. We've all spoken about it. And for those who aren't familiar, I thought I'd just give you a quick run through. It really starts back in 2018, where there was a lot of focus on privacy and antitrust issues around the use of online data. And that resulted in government and regulation kind of cracking down on consumer privacy. And mainly that was in the name of GDPR. Secondly, it cuts to big tech making changes as well in the light of these regulatory reviews, and ultimately to Google announcing that they were going to get rid of the third-party cookie. Safari and Firefox had already done this, but I think that with Google announcing that they were going to do it, it really kind of made that realization that it was going to impact us all and the open internet at scale. And thirdly, like everyone was trying to, everyone was trying to figure out ways around this. And they were building identity solutions and analyzing the business impact and really preparing for this new world. So we had some really good momentum there. And finally, Google announced that they were going to delay that deprecation of the cookie. And that's where it kind of stopped. We were building that really good momentum and then it just went flat. So most of the industry agreed 18 months to 2 years ago, that cookies were outdated, they lacked relevance, and they weren't really built with consumer privacy in mind. And that was the reason and the motivation behind most of the change. So the question is, why has that stopped? It's still an issue. The fact it's way too important an issue for the whole industry just to pause the conversation, because cookies are going to be around for a little bit longer. And the facts are that most Australians don't feel like they're in control of their online data, and they have concerns around the use of it. So this is still an issue. We have the chance to address this and educate the market on the viable solutions that are out there and the ones that keep consumer privacy in mind. So looking back just 5 years, it goes back a lot more than this as well, but there's been a lot of changes in just those 5 years, and ultimately can be distilled down to two influential tracks around how we look at identity and the changes there, and that being regulation and changes to big tech. And so globally, we've gone through two large examples of regulatory reform on privacy in both the EU and in California. And these changes, while they differ in execution, they've still got the same ideal at heart, which is the consumer privacy and their choices to who can collect their data and where they're going to use it. And locally, we just touched on earlier, the ACCC is shining the same kind of light, and we are all working together to respond to those recommendations, and it is a great step forward. Outside of regulation, tech companies are driving change as well, with an overall focus on privacy, consumer choice, and some of them transparency. Companies like Google and Apple are making these changes, but let's be clear, they're not leading the way here. They are centralized bodies and they own products and services that might benefit from some of the changes that they make. The impact to either regulation or the tech changes are ultimately the same. It means that there's going to be less data signals for advertisers and publishers to use for targeted advertising. And while we can try to find ways to lessen the impact, we need to lean into it and to prepare to have the conversation about the clear value exchange between consumer and publisher. And we build identity solutions that leverage those first-party data solutions. And we need to do it fast. Advertisers and marketers will be feeling the pressure as they can see what amounts to decades worth of progress towards perfecting their consumer engagement models about to be wiped away. And what should be apparent is that the power of walled garden platforms poses an existential threat to their advertiser businesses. The increased need for consumer desire and privacy compliance and regulation has not gone away. So while Google has maybe delayed the rollout of their plans to deprecate third-party cookies, regulators won't be giving them a chance, won't be giving the big tech companies room to breathe. One of the first lessons GDPR has taught us is never to wait. We can see that there was a little bit of a wait and see kind of approach to the impact that GDPR would have. And the European market is really only just recovering from that. So taking a learning from that, we need to know that we can't afford to wait ourselves. As we've just seen, every few months, there's going to be changes coming in the form of regulation or tech changes, and that change is going to be constant. So we need to make sure that we're having the right conversations with our brands and marketers to make sure they're ready for this impending change. So the industry may feel that we've been offered a bit of a temporary respite, but the urgency is with us to facilitate a thoughtful continuation of data-driven advertising with targeting and measurement across all channels in mind. There's a clear need and a desire to build a more scalable and durable solution to identity resolution. And the ideal ID will be open source, it'll be interoperable and available to all players in the ecosystem to ensure that transparency and confidence. And here comes the sell. We must start with the right privacy foundation. Unified ID 2.0 was designed from its inception with privacy principles in mind, and the global rollout is now taking local jurisdictionary changes in mind, which will prepare itself for both future and current changes. We're approaching a time where leading partners will not only store and share their data to the highest standards of privacy and security, but they'll also enforce that across the partners who use that data as well. UID 2 was designed with a philosophy to give consumers transparency and control. Data doesn't move unless the consumer wants it to, and they have to opt in explicitly to each site and app. There's no centralized database or company that controls it, the consumer does. UID 2's framework is designed to provide a secure way to transfer first-party email-based data into transactional IDs that can be used across all environments. And regular rotation of the decryption keys will enforce industry accountability measures. In addition to the consumer control, publishers also have control as to who uses their data. They can choose to work with reputable, trustworthy partners when looking at their all-important first-party data. And crucially, UID 2's strength comes from a collaboration. It's a diverse response to a major industry issue, and it's about creating something that works for everybody. It's an industry solution rather than a platform solution. And there's a lot of choice. This here shows that everyone is trying to work towards a solution. And many of our advertisers are asking us, how do we go through this? How do we get through this whole marketplace where there's so many solutions, and which one do we choose? And this points to one of UID 2's guiding principles, which is that interoperability. It works with other identity solutions and integrates to provide UID 2s across their offering. And although we anticipate that UID 2 will be widely adopted, interoperability will allow UID 2 to power connections with other leading solutions, serving as a common identity fabric. The interoperability extends as far as our partnerships with SSPs too, with the majority of SSPs agreeing to pass UID 2 through the bid stream where available. And we've recently had further success with Google agreeing to pass this through Google Ad Manager as well. But more importantly, that they won't use this ID themselves, but they will pass it on to third parties. This will likely put pressure on other walled gardens to offer similar functionality. So even despite the delays in cookies changes and regulatory review, we can take some light from engagement in other markets globally with UID 2. Made In, which is a US-based e-com advertiser, saw an average 20% decrease in its average cost per acquisition across its UID 2 campaign. The time it took to convert a customer who was identified by an ID dropped by a third. And Tatari, who was a CTV provider that also translated their logged in users to UIDs, saw an uplift in budget from Made In due to its high UID 2 match rates and CPA results. We've seen ads targeted using UID 2s are shown for some publishers to drive a eCPM 116% higher than it would if it was targeting cookies on the same inventory. So these are really encouraging results and ones that we look to replicate locally as well. So there's a clear and declared interest and support for an open industry standard to identity resolution. There are players these are the players that are already on board with UID 2, and there's encouraging global momentum here, which is driven by both a sense of urgency and inevitabilities that cookies are going to go away. Outside of UID2, there's increasing support for interoperable identity solutions in general, which paves the way not only for a replacement for the cookie, but a significant upgrade to it. So wrapping up, we know this is important. We've got to use a small amount of time that we have to really use it wisely. The support of UID2 in the APAC market, it's an encouraging sign that industry is rallying around a solution that's aimed towards helping the entire advertising ecosystem become more open, more transparent, and more consumer friendly. The deprecation of the third-party cookie is both a chance and a challenge that more and more companies are rising to meet in APAC and beyond. Thank you. We're going to go to a panel.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to make you sit down now. Oh, you got to grab one of those. Fair enough. Now, we are doing something slightly different with this particular panel. Thank you. And we have a scriber whose name is Diana somewhere, who will be scribing the conversation and bringing it to life visually. Is that correct?
That's right. Okay.
Good. All right. And I'm not too sure how we're going to visualize that. Oh, in fact, here we go. There we are. There it's happening. So this is something I highly recommend. It's fun when it's done and you can visualize those conversations. And good luck with all the acronyms, by the way. So thank you very much. It's good and it's an important reminder that we can't just we can't sit still on this key topic. And I'm going to ask you, Gabby, first of all. In fact, no, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. Sorry. Please start, Gabby, and say who you are, as we haven't got your faces up there anymore. So.
Gabby Stubbs, I look after product marketing, product strategy for our data management solutions at Adobe across APAC.
Thank you. Amelia?
Amelia Ward, I'm a Senior Director at Index Exchange.
I'm Josh, I look after data. Sorry, I do that a lot. I look after data at Paramount, ANZ.
And we know Ashton. So thank you. I'm going to start with you, actually, Gabby. As we mentioned, both Ashton and I hinted at it too, we still feel reliant on this 25-year-old solution called cookies, and marketers feels like they're still largely addicted to the drug. So what are you hearing from your clients around, first of all, their intent to wean themselves off, and if they're actually engaging in those discussions with you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I guess Adobe, we're quite fortunate. We don't have a lot of clients that are necessarily still in the grieving process. Okay. They're recognizing that it's actually going to go away. But I think if you think about a little bit more holistically, we're starting to see a lot of really good conversation around it, but it's very, I guess, inconsistent based on use cases and maturity and objectives and things like that. And I know you mentioned certainly earlier, we have, people certainly when they start to talk about indirect channels, talking about the possibility of what they might use Google Privacy Sandbox for. We have a lot of people who are trying to balance out their different media executions and strategies around things like contextual, which you also mentioned. But for the most part, there's this double down on first-party data strategy, which is quite significant. And sometimes you actually see the connection piece between contextual and first-party as well, where a lot of people are using new opportunities in their marketing sort of strategies to be able to insert opportunity for authentication or to actually, capture that first-party data to build out. So they're kind of dueling this piece around complementary sort of strategies in the other. But if you take it back one little step more back even into marketing, I think what's one of the most interesting things across the last 2 years is that when we study, digital trends across, all of APAC, we've seen almost a flip in terms of activations in some sorts from wholly like 80% acquisition, 20% retention. We've seen almost a flip of that. And that could be by virtue of some of the scenarios around sort of COVID as well happening, but that's certainly an interesting thing that I think starts to build out that muscle around behaviours towards first party and having those direct relationships. Mm-hmm. But I think the themes that we see holistically are first and foremost, we've talked a lot about consumer centricity and privacy first. We're actually seeing that starting to happen now, a lot more concerted effort around that. I think for most clients, they've had a significant reliance on buying, their data or their clients in bulk off those third parties, and they've suddenly realised that they don't have that relationship direct to consumer. So that's where you're starting to see that piece fall around the first party data strategy really doubling down. And then I think there's this extended piece beyond that. We've got a lot of our mature clients really starting to explore the extension of that first party data now. I'm looking, a lot around the identity solutions that they might be able to leverage, but also into collaboration where they haven't always played nicely beforehand. They're certainly looking at those opportunities to whether it is the leverage of an ID for interoperability or certainly data collaboration for extension of their own ID as well.
That's great. That's a very thorough answer. Gabby, now for you, Josh, as a broadcaster, publisher, sort of two parts of a question layering on a little bit from Gabby's point around how you're building out those first-party logged in authenticated audiences, and also a lot of CTV delivered through SSAI is cookieless anyway. So what are the opportunities that you're seeing for delivering on the targeting attributes that your clients want?
Well, we have, I guess, our environments have never been cookie first. Okay, is this okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Jesus. We've never been a cookie first environment in that respect. So we had to, by design at the beginning, find innovative ways to try and understand who's watching a program and how do you attach them to an advertiser or pass those insights through the business. So that meant that this people by design thing, when we went with an ID first strategy, when we were trying to set up data capability on connected TV platforms. For context, I came from a world of websites and mobile apps, and I entered 10, and there's 12, 13 different ways you can watch 10 currently. And there's different variations of that. You can live stream, you can watch on demand, you can catch, those type of things. So each of these have their own trading methods, and we trade direct and we trade programmatically, and we've got multiple supply networks, and it's just a very complicated thing. So when you're thinking about the data targeting, you have to have consistency everywhere, because everyone's saying, well, I need scale when I buy. I need to understand what is about your audience that's interesting to me. And if our viewers look one way in our own world, but look very differently in another person's, where you're trying to buy or plan or measure the effect of your campaign, it's problematic. And people say, well, 10 is shit. I'm not going to spend there. So those are the problems that are very real for us. So one additional thing is we are fortunate enough to be able to say, hey, please log in. And it's not such a weird thing. You come to 10, you're like, okay, well, this is pretty normal. I can do that. So you log in. Our actual challenge was to be data ready on those platforms when people come through. So now you're starting to bring identity together. You're bringing the data plumbing that had to exist. And then the way we've gone about doing data partnerships or data design principles is been largely around real world things. My name is Josh. I have an email. I'll say it now. But those are measurable and useful things. The device touch points that are attached to those are a little bit less useful, and they're very transient. And so a lot of our design was around understanding identity first with those things. And we tried to decouple, or at least not be overly reliant on things like cookies, because it's, as you can see, it's like tectonic plates and everything's moving. The ground's moving as you're going. I don't even know if I answered your question.
Yeah, fair enough. I had a two-part question, so
good luck trying to capture all that on
I think we got there. Yeah, good luck on the scribing. How's that going? Looks good. I just think that just the relationship with consumers, that value is so much clearer now in how you can see, at least from my experience as a human being, that interaction around the value as people are subscribing, the services, and even the unsubscribe options, which is a lot tidier. So Amelia, with your Amelia's interesting, can I call you beast, or is that totally inappropriate? So having 17 years on the agency side, now moving into ad tech world, I think I'm really keen to see what you're seeing in terms of clients and their preparedness. Are you seeing everyone go, oh, hang on, we've got a bit of time off? Have we lost some momentum? Is there a lack of urgency?
I think that urgency itself has probably gone down a little bit, just in terms of that frantic where everybody had this massive looming deadline. That has definitely gone away a little bit. I think that it's the opposite in terms of conversations and interest, though. I feel like that has really ramped up. Mm-hmm. So we're hearing from a lot of our partners in the market really about them looking into wanting to test, trial, create those connections to addressable supply right now and figure out what that scale looks like, what it means for their own tech stack, basically the building blocks. And the really meaningful conversations, that's what seems to be happening right now.
Okay, there's testing and learning. People are getting their hands dirty. Excellent. So Ashton, what else can we do? What else do you think should be considered? Are we missing anything?
I don't know if we're missing anything. I think like we get into this, there's so much choice, right? So when all of these came up, is this working? There it is.
Perfectly.
Closer. Thanks, Josh. Maybe I'll do Josh like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we saw, like there's a lot of choice, and there was a little bit of complacency with people trying to maybe wait for the right one that's going to tick all the boxes in terms of some of the reform that might be coming down, or what's happening in other markets, and I think that wait and see approach isn't really going to work. So the thing you just need to look at is making sure that you're working with independent, secure kind of solutions that provide you choice no matter which provider. And then on the flip side, I think that anything with data, like we can get really into the weeds with some of the data that's available, and you can get into this like paralysis analysis and see, okay, now I've got to check match rates, and I've got all this data, so I'm going to find this really, really tiny audience and try to get them when we're not working at scale right now. That kind of defeats the purpose. It's almost like, can I target the same audience that I could on a cookie or a mobile ad ID via an ID that's coming through on all channels? That's not one of those. Then yes, we're in the right direction. And then it's like, how do we ramp that up by the conversations that we're having with tech and data and publisher partners?
Which is a great point, right? Cookies are still here. Third-party cookies, don't forget. First-party, fine. So we can actually test and compare now. Don't forget, is another reason to not wait till that last minute to put in your homework. Any other inputs on that in particular?
Yeah, I think I'd only add from on top of that to Amelia's point, it's not that people have actually stopped. There's plenty of conversation going on. When we've actually measure readiness, I know similar to what you do. So, more than 12 months ago, we had 37% of people saying that they were ready for cookieless. And at the end of last year, it went backwards to 33%. So I think it's got a lot more to do with it. It's not that they're asking, it's actually they've looked at it and gone, oh shit, this is actually really hard.
Yep.
And a lot of the conversations aren't comfortable and they're not sexy either. So there are a lot of things that people are starting to talk to us about before that they've never talked about. So about people and about processes, like their org structures, their operating models, that's really complex and does take a significantly greater amount of time to actually be able to achieve. So yeah. I think they've realised it's significantly more, but it's also a really great time to take a breath and reset about, that, and really owning, controlling that destiny yourself as well.
Yeah, they're grown-up conversations. I think they're quite sexy. But the other point, and a bit of work we did on the Data Council, of which Gabby and Josh are parts of, is we did identify, kind of explain, we did a matrix of the most popular in Australia and tried to provide as much information. And that, I assume, Amelia, is an index that's something that you're also assisting with, just sort of going through the process of supporting your clients on the products that are available and trying to consult in quite deeply on that particular topic, a range of options.
100%. I mean, Index has a really privileged position to be kind of on both sides of supply. We are there to help buyers, with their supply approach, and then connect them and consult with them on the best supply partners. So it really kind of is this, we have this opportunity right now to help people have those conversations, help them to work within their current tech stack as well. And to the point about interoperability, it's really about creating those connections within the ID solutions that people are utilising right now. So, UID to RAMP ID, they're the kind of conversations that we're having at the moment, because that seems to be the most kind of common, I guess, within the ID solutions. And for us, the goal that we have is to really create those connections across the supply chain and connect buyers with supply.
Yeah, I mean, amongst those options, you have to imagine ultimately, particularly once things change, that market forces will come into play. There'll be certain solutions and partnerships that are more ubiquitous than others, that may be inconsistent globally or locally. And it's a question of testing.
That's the thing. The testing is really key right now. And that is just 100% what people are doing. Testing supply and just seeing what is out there and what's scalable within that addressability. Connections.
And I assume that's a massive part of the conversations that Adobe are having with their clients as well, being as objective as possible.
Yeah, and I think we benefit from the fact that we are decentralized, neutral tech, right? I think that's really critical. And I know Ashton sort of spoke about that earlier beforehand. So, our forethought is we think that those clients that are really going to double down on solutions that are consumer trust first and probably around rebuilding first party strategies, they're probably going to be the brands that do win. And our role in that is helping to champion those efforts and making sure people are doing so within that neutral and decentralized tech to be able to make sure consent and privacy and all of those things are accounted for. I guess our 4 principles sit largely around first party data management, data collaboration, activation, whether you're leveraging those additional, vendor people-based identifiers or whatever it might be. And then also consumer trust is pretty central to everything we do.
Yeah.
But if you take that centerpiece that is around data collaboration, that's where we consider interoperability, right? And I think moving forward for us, it's about how we ensure that our brands have control around their data usage. And I said that around before, that owning your own destiny, I guess, around it. How you enable direct relationships with other brands to be able to scale that or leverage those IDs, but also maintaining that neutrality within it as well. So I guess we are very relatively, I'm going to say neutral as opposed to agnostic per se. We have integrations with people like, the Trade Desk or LiveRamp, whoever it might be. But the intent is to enable our clients to have the flexibility and the neutrality in that to make their own choices and to be able to still be the masters of that destiny.
And then how's that working with Paramount, 10, CBS, all of those that you now represent in some ways? Josh, can I say that? Because there's a broadening portfolio there.
Yes.
How does interoperability work for you? What impacts in terms of your targeting strategies and opportunities could there be that need to be considered?
There's lots of impacts. I think I was going to respond to what you're saying now, Gary, which is I don't think that a lot of this is actually a tech solution. I think we are so focused on how does the technology resolve, because it used to work like this and now it doesn't work. Fix it. It's not just a technology solution. Sorry, I should say that. When shareholders give a shit about privacy, when your bottom line is affected, when people have commercial invested interest in the sustainability of your business model, that's when I think that stuff starts to build momentum. And these questions of, it's not urgent now because someone like Apple hasn't come and just switched it off and forced that kind of urgency. That Google thing is there's too much time. So, we're going to change this and we're going to be consultative. And yes, it's helpful. It's an important thing. But we're all kind of waiting for someone to build a technology solution to something that's a far more complicated problem, right? Apple are optically sending the right signals to their customers. It's like, we change this, we're privacy first. No one can touch our customers except us. Shh, don't look. So, but it's good. And then, sorry, so the interoperability stuff for us is all the exchange partners, all the mediators, the publishers themselves. If a brand picks one partner, this is my ID partner, I partner with LiveRamp or I partner with the Trade Desk, whatever it is, I'm in. All the publishers downstream have to be able to be on board with that and have synced and make sure that it works. But other brands will choose different partners. And there was 80 something currently, there'll be more. So the pressure on us is, do we have to stand up and spin up? Not everyone is advocating for we'll be interoperable and take care of that mess for you. We've got to consider all these things, but we've got 3 or 4 different downstream exchange partners that currently are necessary for trading. So you have this duplication of effort. And you already have leakage in today's trading things. We have leakage in our own ad server from platforms we own and manage. They're ours, our contracts, our name, our inventory flows. We still have drop-offs. When you start adding all of these things and dependencies, it really, really dilutes. So I'm not rushing for being too beholden to that because it's complicated and we're still figuring out everyday changes. I think that we'll probably land up partnering with people who are more progressed and more open, which I think the Trade Desk are doing a brilliant job. Because it's that, or you just lump all this stuff into one walled garden, and then
I'll just get a contract for you down there.
we are painful to them. So yeah, I don't think we have an answer, to be honest. I just think it's a misunderstood, not clearly understood space.
Yeah, and that's the reason for the proposal around idsources.json you may have seen, where you can publicly declare and see which identifiers certain entities are working with. So it can be figured out, readable by machines and by humans. So I know UID2 is sort of donated to the industry, open source and all the rest of it, but it works with the Trade Desk, obviously. So how are you finding the conversation with agencies and marketers around UID2? How's the progress?
There's been really good momentum globally. I think this is a different market, and what we see globally as well is, one market might be more of a ramp market, one might be more of an ID2 market. So, the good thing is being interoperable as we can work with that. But from a tech side, from a publisher side and an agency and brand side, we've seen really, really good support. And some of the world's top advertisers are currently transacting on UID globally in the platform. Locally, we see, people are having the right discussions, to your point earlier, and they're doing the right things in terms of preparation. They're integrating CDPs, they're building out first-party data strategies. So they're well on their way. And we've got some brands that are uploading their CRM data into our platform ready to activate. I just think it comes down to that complacency and waiting for scale. And just because the scale isn't there right now across some of the IDs, it doesn't mean that advertisers don't want to use it. So I think that it's just about encouraging that and pushing that forward. And we'll see a lot of movement this year, I think, on brands using those UID2s across all environments. And I think that's key, because it's not just across those environments that you traditionally do have, cookie and device ID information. It's once we cross into that CTV, ecosystem, that's when they'll really light up as well.
Okay. Now, last couple of questions for the panel from me. We will have time for questions. I'm going to get in trouble with Jen and Tiff because I've forgotten the iPad, which is where we're getting the Slido questions from. Sorry. So are you going to manage that for me? Yeah, good. I just basically need looking after and organising. Excellent. So in terms of what's left? What more would you like to see, perhaps Amelia or Gabby, in terms of to get more momentum? What's the recommendation that you'd make to to the next steps?
We've mentioned it a couple of times, but the whole test and learn, this is your opportunity right now to test. I would say, on the buy side, take this time now, figure out, your tech stack and the optimum components of that. Figure out what your KPIs are going to look like. Figure out where your scale is going to come from. It will be there. So you do obviously have to test it to find it. I think one other thing would be figure out your measurements, your metrics of success, and what that looks like for you, because once everything goes live, and that's kind of our future, which it absolutely will be, if you haven't figured all this stuff out in advance, you're going to be scurrying. It's going to feel a lot less structured and controlled. So figure out attribution, measurement, all that sort of stuff. And then from a publisher side as well, I would say if you've got addressable inventory, open it up, because there are 100% buyers out there who are testing right now. Right now. And that collaborative approach, I think that working together as an industry, working together as different components of an ecosystem is really how we're going to drive it forward, and collaboration is key.
Yeah, I don't think I'd differ necessarily too far from that. I think, the point's been well made about not necessarily going in on one strategy. It's way too early to tell where we're going to land. There isn't going to be a single bullet, and absolutely find mechanisms to be able to test and utilize that. And that might be different for different objectives as well. And we would exactly say the same thing around, collaboration and making sure you can actually find those opportunities, whether complementary, more meaningful. The only thing I would add in terms of the brand metrics is now is a really great time. What we see is the really only sustainable competitive advantage moving forward, if everyone is in the same boat now, is actually around the experience that you're delivering to your customers, right? And from that point of view, when you're thinking about your metrics as a marketer, you have to think slightly longer term than what we have beforehand in terms of those straight campaign execution. So what does that actually look like in that longevity with the engagement with the client, the loyalty of the client as well? So you'd have to make consideration for that being a success metric more than what it ever has beforehand, and potentially doubling down into that retention sort of strategy as well.
Perfect. I always love Gabby's answers. They're so effective and efficient. There's a lot of information that comes out in a short space of time. Same with the rest of you. Now. I think we panel probably too often. I'm just always love listening to it. Do we have anything on Slido? We do. Can I just check in the crowd first if we have anything, any hands up, any questions? What do we have on Slido then?
Publisher adoption rate of UID 2.0 in the ANZ market.
Ashton.
We're having conversations with a lot of publishers. It's at a stage where because there's global interest from global publishers as well, there is scale to run on that, and because we're in a proof of concept kind of stage, that's where we think that a lot of the proof of concept will be. And then once we prove that out with case studies like we saw, we need to work through some of the privacy issues locally as well. But there's nothing signed at the moment. We're in conversations with a number of them.
Okay, solid publisher adoption rate. Sorry, I should remember to repeat the question when it comes through. Tiff's keeping her army. Any more from Slido? All right. I was wondering, Josh, if you had anything to add from Paramount CBS 10 broadcaster publisher perspective in terms of what you'd like to see next, whether that's from partners, whether that's from vendors?
What would I not like? I think a lot of the themes have come out today already. The ACCC stuff is really good. There's a lot in that. I think I would love to see every business in the market, regardless of where you sit on the buy side, supply side, whoever you are, just lean in, be accountable, be responsible. We're all 100% responsible for taking this stuff seriously. You don't have to wait for other people. It's always, I feel like some of us will shoulder this, we'll be involved, we'll be proactive in these type of situations. But who's the champion in your own business for driving change?
Yes.
It's not someone that we're all leaders on our own, right? So I think that's the thing I would love to see more of. The rest will just take care of itself. And I think with everyone kind of doing that, you probably get there a lot faster.
Repeated internal evangelism can be exhausting, but it's so important. I'll admit it was a failure on my part in a previous role where I think I did it well for a couple of years, and I just sort of gave up. It just got too knackering, frankly. And that made some of the internal conversations around what we want to do harder. And it's just, that was a miss, and it's worth considering. So we are, as a data council, looking to put out first-party data paper. We're going to build an event around it in a few months, so look out for that. For now, please give a round of applause to the panel. And to Diana for her beautiful piece of work.